Okay,
Yep.
that's more convenient.
Uh,
Um,
yes. Got it.
hey guys, welcome back to Blood, Sweat, and Steel. I'm Chris, and I have with me today a very special guest, Meagan Black from Round the Cauldron on YouTube, and I believe you have a podcast, don't you?
Yes, I do.
All right. Well, would you like to introduce yourself and say, let us know, let people who don't know you know who you are?
Sure. So my name is Meagan. I run the YouTube channel Round the Cauldron with the podcast that pairs with it, also called Round the Cauldron. I am an eclectic witch, I would say, been practicing for too long, quite a bit, quite a few years, I should say. I used to be Wiccan, and then I moved away from Wicca into Irish paganism, and I have been working with Brigid for about 3 years now, I want to say, 2 or 3 years. It's been a ride. It's been a ride.
You must have found you roughly around the same time as me, because that's about how long I've been working with her. 2.5.
Yeah,
So,
just about that time. I
yeah.
was still living in Oregon at the time.
Okay. Yeah. And you kind of answered my first question, actually. First, we are here to do talk about Brigid and talk with Meagan about how she works with her and what her experience has been with the goddess Brigid. So my first question is, when did you first discover witchcraft and paganism, and did one come before the other? Or did you kind of find them both at the same time?
Well, I discovered Wicca first, and I was maybe 12 years old at the time. For
Wow.
reference, I'm going to be 30 this year. So it's been a while. I discovered it like a lot of people my age did at that time, through like Scott Cunningham and Dorothy Morrison. And so I think I kind of found religion, like paganism and witchcraft at the same time, because with Wicca, they are together. It wasn't until several years later when I first started getting more involved in the online witchcraft and pagan communities that I really realized, well, there's way more ways of doing this than just Wicca. And, I stuck with Wicca for a while. It was comfortable. It was easy. I feel like I need to preface, I was never initiated into any Wiccan tradition. So I'm what you would call, I was neo-Wiccan. So Wicca outside of the traditions, without all of the mysteries that you get inside of those initiations. I think that's an important distinction to make.
So you weren't Gardnerian or Alexandrian or anything like that?
No, I wasn't. I was just neo-Wiccan. I was Wicca without the initiation.
And that seems like a very common way to come into paganism, because that's the same thing that happened to me. In fact, it was Scott Cunningham's book that brought me into that, like when I went looking for it. So
yeah, I don't remember if I went looking for it. I think my best friend, who is still my best friend, actually brought me a book and was like, hey, this book's really interesting. We should read it together.
Well,
and it's kind of like all history from there.
Yeah, I wonder if anybody goes looking for it, if we all get prompted in some way. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it depends. A lot of us are prompted to just move out of it from, whatever sort of upbringing we were in. I have found in my experience, a lot of the people that I have talked with, they don't come from very nice backgrounds or childhoods, and they come into the occult and witchcraft as a way to empower themselves and really feel like they have control over their lives. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it does. It definitely does. So, okay, how long after you discovered witchcraft and paganism did you start to identify as the same?
That's complicated.
Okay.
Because so being as I was a child, basically, I very much hid it from my family because my family was Christian. And I remember bringing up with bringing it up with my mom one time, like, Mom, hey, I want to do this. And she goes, absolutely not. That's devil worship. That's of the devil, which is a very common misunderstanding, misconception. So when I first started out and I was first learning, I never really took that label on for myself. And I actually flip-flopped a lot back and forth between, okay, yes, I'm going to practice Wicca, or, okay, no, I need to go back to church. And, okay, I'm just not going to do anything.
Yeah.
But they were always there. I think within the last maybe 10 years, 5 years even, was when I really first started saying it out loud. Like, yes, I am a witch. Yes, I am a polytheist. Yes, I am not Christian. I don't follow monotheistic beliefs. And it just has to do with being more comfortable with who I am and what I believe, and really taking on that idea of like, well, I don't really give a shit what other people think.
Right. And that takes a while.
Yes. And it's not something that, well, I can't say your average teenager, because your average teenager really doesn't care what the adults in their life think. But
yeah. Your camera's frozen up here. Hang on. Sorry, your camera.
My camera's frozen?
Yeah, and I'm not sure if mine is on your end either.
It's not. You're moving.
Okay. Let's try switching it, because now I can see you're moving.
Okay.
There we go. Just had to switch the view for a second. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. So it took a little while, and there was yeah. Mine a similar experience. I think that's probably also fairly common.
I would say so. It's not. I don't think it's something like a lot of people want to other themselves. They don't want to be seen as other.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to get easier as time goes on for future generations, because we are more public. We are more like, information is more available. And, it's nice to see the younger people being like, yeah, I'm a witch. Even if at first they're just doing it just to do it and to get like the clicks and the views and whatever. It's nice that people aren't scared to do it. They're not scared to say it.
Yeah. And I that's a completely different experience than what I had, because I came into it when I was well into my 30s.
Mm-hmm.
So I was living on my own at the time. Now I'm getting a small taste of that because I live with my grandma, and she's very Methodist.
Mm-hmm.
Love her to death, but she's been Methodist for 88 years. She's not going to change her mind.
Yeah.
But she's not home right now, which is why we're having a meeting now.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to stress her out.
Yeah.
So it's not really for my sake. It's mostly for her sanity.
Yep. That makes a lot of sense.
So you've already answered another question. Do you consider yourself to be a pantheist, polytheist, or, a panentheist? But we covered that. And did Brigid have any influence on that, or did you already establish that well before you started working with Brigid?
So I think it was kind of established at around the same time, because going from Wicca to Irish polytheism was very different, because with the eclectic Wicca that is present online in a lot of spaces, it's very much, you get to pick your god and your goddess, or the names that you use for those two. And some people choose one of each and they stick with it. Some people view different deities as aspects of like the one goddess, like all gods are one god, all goddesses are one goddess.
Right.
And I never really felt comfortable with that. Even within Wicca, I never gave god and goddess names, because they never told me what they were. And I didn't really want to just like plug something in there. It's not like a plug and play for me. And so I actually flip-flopped back and forth a lot between hard polytheism and soft polytheism, trying to figure out which one made sense for me. So I'm definitely a hard polytheist now. I don't view the gods as one aspect of each other. So like Aphrodite and Venus are two completely separate deities. And I feel like Brigid did play a role in that because Brigid is Brigid and she is nobody else.
Yeah. Bridget is not Hephaestus.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
I happen to share a similar view, actually the same view in terms of being a hard polytheist. There's days where I'm like, I am far more okay with soft polytheism than others.
Mhm.
But I always end up coming back to hard polytheism.
Yeah.
And the reason I asked that question is, yeah, Bridget had everything to do with that.
Mhm.
So, um, so do you or have you worked with any deity other than Bridget? And if you're willing to say who, if so.
Not in the way that I have worked with and honored Brigid. So I have given offerings to other deities in passing. I have, uh, asked other deities for things and kept that open line of reciprocity because it's very much a thing with the Irish gods is, it's a give and take.
Yeah.
But never anybody as close as Brigid.
Mm.
I have inklings and feelings of maybe there's somebody else, not necessarily that is calling to me, but that I'm feeling more drawn to. And it's something I need to explore, but I don't think I'm ready to talk about that yet.
Fair enough. Yeah. Yeah. Um, so do you consider your work with Bridget to be deity worship? And if so, how do you define worship and how do you feel it's different from other respectful forms of divine interaction?
I have been struggling with this definition recently, actually,
Yeah.
because a lot of people view deity work and deity worship as the same thing. Um, but I don't, because you can worship and honor a deity without actively working with them.
Yeah.
You can say, like, I honor you and all that you have done, um, without asking for anything in return. So I worship and honor Brigid on a regular basis, daily, sometimes a couple of times a day, just really depends on what's going on in my life. I work with her occasionally.
Mm.
So sometimes I will need a little bit of extra help with something. And that's where that work part comes in. Like with the worship, I'm actively giving her offerings anyway. But with the working with her, it's extra offerings and extra steps and extra sacrifice on my part so that if she feels necessary or if she decides that she wants to, she can step in and help. Um, I have a recent example of this actually. Uh, so I have a Jeep Wrangler and we got it in March, I think, something like that. But there was something wrong with it. And I took it to the shop and they couldn't find anything wrong. And I was like, well, I know there's something wrong because there is a noise happening that's not supposed to happen. Like, I know there's something wrong with it. Um, so I petitioned her and asked her for her help figuring this out to make sure that everything worked. Because yes, she is a goddess of healing and poetry, but she's also a goddess that is a smith and she works with metals and steel and all of the mechanics and machinery. And so I was like, this is perfect. So instead of just the usual offerings of dairy and her candle, I made a deal with her and said, if everything works out and if it gets fixed with the caveat that it's paid for and that I don't have to pay for it, then she would get something extra. and that extra killed my shoulder. But I gave her a whole week's worth of flute practice, an hour a day, which if anybody plays the flute, an hour straight of flute practice is a lot.
Yeah.
Plus new poetry. So everything worked out great. She got her devotional flute practice. I got the pain back in my shoulder, and she got her extra
I'm very
pillow.
familiar with shoulder pain. Yes.
Yeah. So it's more of a give and take when you're working with them. And usually the sacrifices that are required are bigger. Like an hour of my day every day is a lot for me to give sometimes. And especially with, I'm relearning how to play the flute. I haven't played the flute consistently since I was like 14. So it's practice for one, but also I have a shoulder issue that it exacerbates being up like this. So I'm like, you know what? It's worth it. If I don't have to pay hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars to get my Jeep fixed, if you want to help me with this, I will give you this. And it's a sacrifice of my time and my comfort. And that seems to work for us.
Yes. And I absolutely love that example, because I've always thought of Brigid as being very like the modern, like the gods evolve with time. And as technology evolves, so do their realms of dominion, in my opinion. And Brigid is very much the blue collar goddess, hands on, getting it done. She, blacksmithing is literal, but it's also figurative for hard work, mechanical, hands on work. I kind of see her like, I don't get images or visions of her, but I picture her very much like in a steampunk kind of forge setting. So I actually love that you use that specific example. And that's just my own personal opinion.
Oh yeah, this is all definitely UPG. Like none of my, like, Brigid is the goddess of vehicles and getting your car fixed. That's UPG there.
Yeah. The ancient Celts didn't consider her the goddess of internal combustion engines. They
Exactly.
have them. You're never going to find that anywhere in the myth.
Exactly.
But you can extrapolate from what she was known for to an extent.
Yeah.
So how did you find Brigid in the first place? Did she find you? And were you reluctant or excited about
it? So it was kind of both, I feel like. As I was moving out of Wicca, I have always been fascinated with Irish history, folklore, mythology, politics, just Ireland in general. And so that was really the direction that I gravitated to. And in my research and learning, I came across Brigid first because of her connection with crafting and like creating things as like a bard, a poet. But I connected it more with physical crafting and fiber arts because of my crochet. So that's really where that connection came in. I had felt something there. I just didn't have a name or an image to put it with. And then when I came across that, it sort of clicked, and I did a lot of divination, and I took my time giving that specific name to her because I didn't want to jump right into it, because I also know that the gods aren't the only spirits and entities out there.
Right.
So very much, I don't want to say hesitant, but cautious. And then I haven't really looked back.
Cool. That's awesome. So, do you have a favorite myth or story involving Bridget, and what lessons do you take away from that story, and how does that inform your practice?
I have a couple.
Yeah, as many as you want.
So, um, so I know we've talked before about Brigid the goddess and Brigid the saint, and I very much view them as one and the same because Ireland is still very much Catholic and Catholicism is just a part of Irish culture.
Yeah.
So the stories that come to my mind are ones that show her generosity, but also the fact that she takes no shit from anybody. And the first one, I don't remember like the whole story, but it has to do with apples. So someone had given her a basket of apples from their orchard, and she was walking along and she came upon someone who was hungry. So she gave the basket of apples to the person that was hungry. But then the person who gave her the apples was like, well, I gave those apples to you and you just give my gift to somebody else. And so then she made sure that that person's orchard was barren and never produced another apple, like in its entirety.
Yeah.
The second story comes from Lady Francesca Wilde. I forget the name of the book, but it is freely available on sacredtexts.com. I forget if it's .com or .org, but it's sacred texts. And it is about two people that had leprosy. And so she came upon them and she healed one man of his leprosy, hold on, I'm getting it mixed up. She told them that one would wash the other and his leprosy would go away. And then when that happened, she instructed the man who no longer had leprosy to wash the other man's back so his leprosy would go away. And he said, no, I'm not doing that. Then I'm going to get leprosy again. I'm going to be sick again. So she gave that man his leprosy back and took the other man's leprosy away. And both of these stories show her generosity and her charity and her willingness to be there for the people that really need the help. And, as you said earlier, the blue collar people, the people who are, they do the hard work and that might just be down on their luck. But she also expects that from other people. So if if she extends you a kindness, she expects you to extend that kindness to others. And if you don't, then, your kindness is going to be taken away. Very much a take no shit kind of goddess.
I think that's the second time we've mentioned that particular myth in conversation, if I'm remembering correctly.
Probably. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's a great story. I like the story where she's speaking with the king. She's asking him to bargain for getting a piece of land. He goes, okay, well, can I have as much land as my cloak will cover? He was surprised. I'm not going to spoil that one. That's one of my favorites. So anybody that's interested, go and read that one.
Yep.
He was very surprised.
Serves him right too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Do you have a least favorite story?
No, I don't think so.
No. I have stories that don't stick in my mind as much. But there's none that I don't like.
Yeah, I can't think of one that I don't like. The one that's really sad is the creation of Keening.
Yeah.
But it's not a story I don't like. It's just a sad one.
Yeah, it's a sad one. And yeah, I agree. That's just a sad story, but it's not a bad story.
Yeah.
So Bridget's known to have a lot of different aspects. Do you find yourself drawn or called to work with her in any particular aspect, or more often feel a deeper connection through that specific aspect, or is it is it kind of all encompassing for you, or is it kind of?
That's a good question, because I feel like it's all encompassing. I first found her through her, her connection with creation, crafts and fiber arts and poetry and music and things like that. But the longer that we have worked together, I find myself really connecting with all of her aspects at once. I recently finished reading Brigid by Courtney Weber, and there's a passage in that book that really stuck out to me. And it was about how Brigid is like the sum of the whole, but also the whole. So like all of these little pieces, but also the finished product. And I promise I'm going somewhere with that. In my work with her, there has been a lot of shadow work, which I know you and I have talked about.
Yes.
Very much a lot of hammer to anvil, smashing out those shadows, facing different things that need to be faced. And a lot of that for me is done in a creative process through either me creating crochet stuff. It's a meditative, mindful act, which gives me a chance to sit down and make something and use my hands, but I'm also thinking. And it's a process for me to think through things without getting overwhelmed. And also on top of all of that, I connect with the healing aspect, because then that comes in over the top of everything else and helps me move through everything that I need to move through to heal old wounds, to release some of the shadows that I have, and to learn to work with them instead of against them. So she is very much every single little piece of the puzzle in my life, but also has a lot to do with the finished product, with the end goal. So yeah, long story short, I connect to all of them all together at once and not just a single one.
Yeah, and thank you. That's actually, that starts to make some things make sense. I'm being pulled to do things that I never really will. I never cared about cooking.
About what?
Now, about cooking.
Yeah, so recently
Now
cooking has been a big thing for me too.
Yeah, now all of a sudden I got 2 cookbooks and I really enjoy it, even though I'm terrible at it. So
yeah, very much all of the pieces of the puzzle. And that specific passage, it's more towards the end. I don't remember page numbers or whatever. But it connects Brigid to the entire process of everything, because how can you have a goddess of healing also be a warrior? How can you have a goddess of healing also be a goddess of smithcraft that forges weapons? And it comes full circle, because she ends up with a healing and then the creation in the smith with the weapons and all of that stuff, but also she ends up on the battlefield only when she has to, but she definitely does in one way or the other, either tending to those that are injured or fighting the battles herself. Courtney Weber says it a lot more eloquently than I can. If anybody's interested in Brigid, I definitely recommend that book, and for people to read that passage for themselves.
I strongly recommend that book as well, because that's one of my favorites too.
Mm-hmm.
So I love it. And yeah, she definitely does have that. She is both the warrior and she is the healer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this makes sense to me only through, I had to turn through metallurgy to figure that one out. What I didn't know is, of course, the Celts had their Bronze Age. In the Greek Bronze Age, the soldiers, when they would sharpen and tend to their weapons, they would keep the filings, because copper is antibacterial and antiviral. And they somehow figured that out, whether it was in those scientific terms or not, probably not. But they
Hmm.
would pack the filings into wounds. They would
Hmm.
prevent them from getting infected and turning dangerous.
Yeah.
So in war, there is healing, even though war is what causes you to need it. The battlefield medic is probably the biggest badass in the military.
Yes.
So all he has is a sidearm to defend himself. His job is to pull people out of the fire. So
Yep.
that's sort of how I see Brigid. The warrior is the battlefield medic.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I do. There is a story that I've been looking for that Courtney Weber mentions in her book that says, as a saint, Brigid was also known to fly across the battlefield, screaming and wailing
Mhm.
to scare away, or I don't know even if it's to scare away, but just
To
like a
frighten
war
and
cry.
to frighten and
Yeah.
disorient. Yep, that's
Yeah.
where I got that. Yep, and I love that. I can't find it either, but she's a hell of a lot better at research than I am. So, but yeah, and then in my searches through it, it was Brigid or Brigante is where the word brigand came from.
Mhm.
Now, that was from Wikipedia, so grain of
We all
salt,
know. Yeah, we all know Wikipedia is not
but
always a great source.
it actually kind of makes sense. You can hear the word in it.
Hmm.
How accurate that is, I'm not a historian. I don't know,
Yeah.
but I could see how somebody would go there.
Hmm.
So, wow, that was all 10 questions, really? Wow, that didn't take nearly as long as I would expected. Um, Actually, one that I wanted to ask you, I've it's been my experience that Brigid has a very Mr. Miyagi style of teaching, and I was wondering if that kind of rings true for you as well or not. In that seemingly mundane tasks, you don't realize you're in school until after the lesson's over. It's been
Yeah,
it's been my experience, but I don't.
probably now that I think about it, yes. And it's also like you don't go to Brigid for quick results.
know.
Absolutely not. You do not go to Brigid for quick results. In my experience, it's a very slow process. It reminds me of that phrase, like slow and steady wins the race. Keep your pace. You go too fast, you're going to wear yourself out. Um, she, for me, has a very kind of like a hands-off sort of teaching. So it's kind of hard to explain. Um, Very much like, okay, we're going to do this thing now. Here is everything that you need to solve this problem. Now go do it. Like, I'm not going to do it for you.
Yeah.
Very much like a tough love sort of thing. And there are also moments when she's just not there. Because I mean, I don't expect her to be there all the time. She is way up here and I am way down here. She's got better things to worry about.
Right.
And the Tuatha De Danann have an entire other world and realm that they're part of. So there are times where I find that she has pulled away a lot, and that there's two reasons in my experience. Either she's busy with something else, or I just don't need her right now. And even though I think that I don't need her, or I think that I need her, she's like, no, you don't. You don't need me. And recently that's happened. Um, I feel like my journey with Brigid has very much been about confronting myself and the shadows within me, but also making me see that, you know, I could use some extra help. Because recently I started going back to therapy. And That's great. I love therapy, but I haven't been to therapy in at least 5 or 6 years. And as soon as I started going back to therapy, she started pulling away. And so obviously correlation does not equal causation. They might not even be related at all. But it almost feels like like she's going, oh, finally.
Yeah. Mhm.
Like all of this stuff that you've been through for the last couple of years working with her, all of the stuff that I've been through in my past and in my childhood, it's sort of like she's saying, okay, now you're on the right track. This is where you need to be right now. So you do that, and I'm going to be over here far away watching and waiting patiently for you to finish doing what you need to do.
Mhm.
And it's actually, it gets difficult sometimes because of Christian baggage that I have coming from a monotheistic faith where we were taught God is omnipresent. He is everywhere with everybody all the time.
Yeah.
So when I first experienced that sort of pulling away of Brigid, where I would call to her and talk to her, and I wouldn't feel anything in return, it scared the crap out of me. Like,
Yeah.
oh God, what did I do wrong? But
Yeah.
it's normal.
Yeah, getting the answering machine can be a bit of a nerve-wracking experience when you're really not
Yes.
used to it.
Yes. Yes. But it's totally okay. It's normal. And I find that going into the darker half of the year, she sort of pulls back anyway, in my experience.
She
Um,
seems to be a bit of a seasonal goddess.
yes. And I know I'm not the only person that has that experience. But that's
But
also UPG. So
yes, that is UPG.
that is UPG.
And
So that's
yeah,
been my experience with her teaching.
yeah. Well, for me, that tends to happen right around Samhain,
Mhm.
but I don't know about anybody else.
I have no idea. I know there is a story in Scottish folklore that puts Brigid and the Cailleach
Yeah,
as the same being, and Brigid transforms into the Cailleach in the darker half of the year, and then they switch.
yeah.
I don't have a source for that story, so keep that in mind.
Sacred text.
It might be there. I just don't have a specific
It's
thing to
the
point to.
I think it's debated whether Bridget and the Cailleach are the same or if they are actually locked in like kind of a continuing secular battle between the seasons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard that one too. Sort of like Lou and Crom at Lunasa.
Yeah, or the Oak and Holly King in
Yeah.
Wiccan. Yeah, the same concept. And that's I think that might be where I first got the notion that Bridget was a warrior because battling it out with the Cailleach, okay, but I also recognize the same symbology there with the Oak and Holly King.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there's plenty of other myths where that happens. So
Yeah.
so wow, I lost that question. Now I'm flying by the seat of my pants because
That's okay.
if I don't
That's
have it
normally how
written
I
down,
do things.
yeah, if I don't have it written down, uh,
It's all right.
yep. So I guess talk more about your experience with her teaching, like or like when she's decided she wants to do something. For me,
Usually there's no stopping it.
yeah, she can kind of be a bit of a blunt force in
Mm-hmm.
in my life, and I don't know if again UPG. There's nothing in the myths. In fact, there's actually kind of the opposite in the way people who like there seems to be a large group of people who recognize her as a goddess of Imbolc, and they really love making offerings and doing things for her right around Imbolc or on Imbolc, because that's kind of a wheel of the year thing. And I think that's kind of beautiful, but also there, the result of that seems to be people have experiences of her being very gentle and calm, and that has not been my experience at all. For me, she's been very blunt and to the point, and it doesn't matter how much you dig your heels into the ground, you're just getting drug along with her, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
Has that been, have you experienced a mix or one or the other?
It's actually kind of a mix. So I find she is more gentle in the moments that I need it most, because I don't do well with confrontation. I don't do well with like anxiety inducing situations. I have a couple of mental health conditions that just make that absolutely excruciating. And when things like that happen, or there's something that I'm really worried about, instead of trying to tackle it head on and think like, okay, I need to do this and this, and how can I get through this? My brain just shuts down and it just doesn't want to move forward. So, and I find in those times where it requires a more gentle touch, she is more gentle in that way, because she's more understanding, I think, of that sort of thing, especially because I have associations of her with shadow work and I have a lot of trauma. So, I feel like she gets it. But in those moments where she knows that I can take a kick in the ass and it's kind of what I need, then that's what she's going to do.
Yeah. Mine is similar. Mine, she tends to be more of the drill sergeant, in that she knows that's the gear change that I'll make when it's time to get something done and I'm slacking and she gets on me like a drill sergeant. I'll shift into that mindset because she knows how to do that.
Yeah. And she's very at least with me, she's not always straightforward. Like getting a straight answer out of her is like pulling teeth.
Right. And yeah, but I think she does that with purpose. She doesn't just want you to get it done. She wants you to figure it out. And that's how you learn. Absolutely. And then she'll toss you out there on your own and turn around and, like you said, she pulls back. Now the training wheels are off. Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. There, I think it was at Bialtana. I have been working on figuring out like either a devotee or a dedication path. Like, is that the right thing for me? Is that even a thing with our relationship together? And she very much knows how to put a mirror in my face and be like, are you sure this is what you want? Are you positive? Are you ready? Because she has pointed things out to me that I'm aware of, that she knows if I were to devote or dedicate to her specifically and to her work and what she wants, that I would be under pressure, that I would probably fail a couple times because I have a problem with commitment. And I mean, I was doing a divination, I was doing a tarot reading at that particular time, asking her again for more information. And she shows me the 9 of Swords reversed. Like, this is what's going to happen. You're scared, and you're right to be scared, because if you devote and dedicate to my path, you have trouble committing and following through on certain things that you say you're going to do, and that's not okay with me. So think really hard about what you want. So instead of making a contract with her, I made a contract with myself. And it's just gone to show me that, she's right, because my contract with myself has gone, okay.
Mhm. Yeah. She does tend to be very good at helping you to avoid pitfalls when she feels it's necessary, when she seems to feel it's necessary. And that's
Mhm.
that's been the case for me too. Like I had an interest in Norse heathenry, and there was a point in time where I was kind of heading in that direction. Well, Bridget was having none of it.
Mhm.
She knew that I wouldn't really fit in with that type of. That's not how I do ritual.
Mhm.
I don't do it in a reconstructionist manner.
Mhm.
So I will. I kind of. I don't do anything the normal way, and she knows it. Who uses an anvil instead of a cauldron? Like, come on now.
You
This is
do.
yeah, and
Hey,
absolutely.
it's still a container for transformation.
It is, yeah. It's still well, yeah, I guess that's the best way of describing it.
Mhm.
So it's also more prone to falling on your foot than a cauldron. So
But both would hurt.
yeah, but yeah, that's there's yeah, Bridget's the one that finally convinced me that I was like, okay, I'm definitely a polytheist,
Mhm.
but do I want to commit or make a devotion or a commitment? Yes, I did, but I dedicated very specifically smithing.
Mhm.
So that's going well, but lately is the summer. I haven't been able to be out in the forge as much as I would like because it is too hot.
Oh yeah.
And my connection with her has kind of petered out a little bit because I'm not doing the thing that I said I would do. Not because I'm breaking an oath, but because she knows it's too hot.
Yeah.
She doesn't want me to have heat stroke out in the shop. So
Yeah.
it's like, okay, well, the lessons are over for now. When it cools off, we'll pick this back up if you get out there. So,
Yeah.
and that's up to me. I have to do that. So, but it's been much more. I'm out of questions, and it's been not quite an hour, about 50 minutes. So, is there anything else you wanted to say, or anything specific that you wanted to talk about in your experiences or journey with Bridget that you wanted to share?
Not really specific. I just want people to know that if they're looking for Brigid specifically, to look outside of what you will find on like Wiccan websites or websites that just give a very surface level understanding of deities and gods and goddesses, because Brigid, just like Ireland, is complicated and complex. There is so much to understand and even just learn about, and not even just understand it, because there's some things like, yeah, I know this thing. That doesn't mean I understand this thing fully, but I know it. There, there is so much. And if you're looking to learn about her in an Irish perspective, not just Celtic in general, because there's a lot there, definitely go to source material, go to Irish authors and sacred texts, and read her stories, and don't just limit yourself to Brigid the Goddess stories, because she is also a saint. She
Yes.
went from goddess to saint, and those stories stick together. And I don't feel like you can accurately understand her as a goddess while also leaving out those stories from Catholicism.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and don't feel like you have to know everything about her,
Yeah,
because that's never going to happen.
yeah. If you think you know everything, that's a good sign. It's time to hang up your witch's hat and just go home. 'Cause-
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Yes. And there's a lot of contradiction in stories in Irish mythology and folklore. And if you're going to go down a path of Irish polytheism, or even just learning about Irish stories in general, you have to get comfortable with that contradiction, because two things can be true at the same time, and that's okay.
Two diametrically opposed things can be the same at the same time.
Mhm.
You know, my coffee cup is full is both true and false. It is full of a liquid and empty of air
Mhm.
at the same time. So
Yeah.
that statement is both true and false simultaneously.
Yep. Yep. A lot of contradiction. It's taken me a while to get comfortable with that, because I am very much a logical thinker.
Yeah.
So when I think about it, I'm like, okay, well, if this is true, this cannot also be true if it's about the same thing. But we can't take the stories and the mythology literally, or we're gonna lose our minds if we try to do that. So we have to look at them metaphorically and through the lens of the times that they were written. Contradictions are okay.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for being here. Guys,
Absolutely.
this is Meagan Black, and she, like we said, has a YouTube channel, Meagan Black Round the Cauldron, and a podcast by the same name.
Mhm.
And is there anywhere else that people can find you that you frequent?
Everywhere. I try to be a little bit of everywhere. So I have a website where I blog occasionally. It's just roundthecauldron.com. I am on Twitter at Round the Cauldron without the D, because Twitter wouldn't let me put all those letters in there. I'm on Instagram at round_the_cauldron. I am on Facebook, though I don't really use it all that often. Same thing, facebook.com/roundthecauldron. I have recently joined TikTok again. And I am making TikToks. I am making little videos. So you can follow me on TikTok if you want. I'm sure I'll give all of the links to Chris, and we could put everything in the description below if anybody wants to bother.
Yeah, send me those links when we're done, and I'll copy paste them into the video, into the video description.
Okay. That works for
All
me.
right. All right. Well, thank you very much. And
Yeah, absolutely. This was fun.
yep. And thank everybody for watching. I'll see you next time in the Forge.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Stop recording.